You are listening to the Mom to Mom podcast, hosted by Stephanie Sinclair and Nikki Zwaber, partners and lead doulas here at How to Mom.
We're moms, we're professionals, and we're here to make motherhood feel a little less heavy and far more supported.
How to Mom is a community built for real life. From pregnancy and birth to postpartum and beyond, we support families through education, connection, and care. Our team of birth and postpartum doulas work with families every day while also sharing stories on our podcast and our blog to curate trusted resources for moms in the Twin Cities and beyond.
On this podcast, we talk about the real stuff, the stories that stay with you, the questions you're already asking, and the moments that feel hard, hopeful, and everything in between.
Absolutely. You will hear honest conversations, expert insight, lived experiences, and reminders that you are not doing this alone.
This is Mom to Mom. We're so glad you're here. And now, on to today's episode. Hey everyone, welcome to today's episode.
When people hear the word Pitocin, they often hear it described as synthetic oxytocin. So it's easy to assume that they're basically the same thing. But while they might be chemically similar, they affect the body very differently during labor. Today, we're talking about the difference between oxytocin and Pitocin and why induced labor can sometimes feel different than spontaneous labor.
Yeah, sometimes they do. They really do. Oxytocin is called the love hormone very often.
Mm-hmm.
It's the hormone that is involved in bonding and connection, breastfeeding, and even orgasming. For those of you out there who don't know, that's what's produced when we orgasm.
Absolutely. But during labor, it has another important job. It is what powers our contractions. Oxytocin is produced in the brain and is released by the pituitary gland.
Yeah. And as your labor progresses, oxytocin creates those rhythmic waves of contractions that help move baby down and eventually bring them into the world and into your arms. So cool.
I love it. But oxytocin also affects the brain in powerful ways. When oxytocin reaches the brain, it activates your natural endorphins, the body's pain relief system, which is so cool.
Yeah.
It lowers your stress hormones like cortisol. It shifts the laboring person into a focused inward state. And it supports emotional bonding and feelings of love and trust. So clearly it's got a big job.
I also love using positions and like talking to clients with their partners about how to boost it.
And understanding it.
In those moments, because it's real. It's not just for fun. It actually is physiologically doing something to your body. So it's really, really an amazing hormone.
Yeah, it's very cool. So then to kind of take it a step further, we're going to talk about kind of the feedback loop of labor. Labor is actually designed to be a loop. When the baby presses and puts pressure on the cervix, the brain then releases more oxytocin. And then that oxytocin creates that contraction. And then those contractions move baby down, which causes the cervix to stretch even more. And that stretching signals the brain to release even more oxytocin. There is the loop for you. And the loop continues until birth. It's one of the reasons why environment matters so much during labor. Feeling safe, supported, and relaxed helps oxytocin flow. And I think it's important to say when we don't feel safe, there's an interruption in that oxytocin, which is also a delay in progress, or sometimes a stall.
A stall or fight or flight, I think can also be a big part of that feeling too. Which is why when we talk to clients about, like whether your desire is to labor at home or whether you do you even know that you can labor at home, right? Like there's that too. And so how those early stages of labor, if you are able and feel safe to labor at home, that actually boosts your oxytocin. Your home, the smells, like maybe your fur babies, maybe your other children, pictures, your comfort, right? Like your own bed, just your own items. And so that's just super important and also plays into your levels of oxytocin. And so it's the environment is so important. And so when you can stay there physically, it actually helps you physiologically.
100%. I love to share the story when I was in early labor with the twins. I was kind of stuck in early labor. I couldn't quite get over that into active labor. And so I called my parents who had Mackenzie at the time, and she was 3.5. And I asked them if they could bring her up to the hospital. And they did, which I was already at the hospital because I was with twins and considered high risk. But they brought Mackenzie. Of course, she fell asleep on the way to the hospital because I'm sure she had sugar being with grandparents, even though it was like a weird time of day to be napping. Anyway, they brought her into the room. And of course, I was extremely emotional because I knew it would be the last time I saw her before the dynamics shifted in our family.
Yeah.
But she was also kind of sleepy and a little bit out of it, which was great because she was just like super calm and mellow. And I was sitting on the birth ball, leaning against the bed, and I asked her if she wanted to come and snuggle. And she came and sat with me, and we snuggled and we kissed and we hugged. And not long after, the shift in my contractions changed significantly to the point where, although I was sad, I had to look at my mom and say, I think you guys have to leave. Like things are getting more intense. And so I always say that Mackenzie directly boosted my oxytocin and put me into active labor with the twins.
I love this. And it's just another thing for her to continue to share that she did for you. You're welcome.
Agree. Yeah. she will soak it up.
Absolutely. Love that for you.
So now that we have like a pretty good understanding of oxytocin and what it is exactly, but then also kind of that loop that it creates, it's very important to now talk about Pitocin and understanding what that is.
Right. And why does it exist, right? Because we just told you that oxytocin is a critical part of your labor and getting everything going in your body. For some of us out there, we may not produce it for whatever reason. It may not come as in the level that we need it to be produced,
or in the timing that we need
it. There's so many variables. And so Pitocin was created as a synthetic version of oxytocin to be used in medical settings. Obviously, I think it's very often commonly used to induce labor and strengthen your contractions. It's given through an IV, and it stimulates your uterus to contract. And so I think when people think about the word induction, Pitocin typically comes to mind first and foremost. It's often used there. It can be very helpful when it comes to labor that does need extra support. I mean, obviously, like you and I have seen it time and time again used with the medical induction and seen it work beautifully. And I think though there's one important difference between oxytocin and Pitocin. Pitocin, yes, stimulates the uterus, but it doesn't cross the blood-brain barrier the same way that oxytocin does.
Which is very important to know.
And it's important because that means that Pitocin doesn't activate the brain's endorphin system or influence your stress hormones in the same way.
Right.
And so this is one of the reasons why induced labor can feel much more intense for some people when they're using Pitocin, and very different than spontaneous labor.
And it's just really important to note whether Pitocin is medically needed or not. If your provider ever says to you, Pitocin is the same thing as oxytocin, that's not accurate.
No.
And the reason why understanding this matters is because it's not about judging birth choices,
right?
But it's knowing that Pitocin is a valuable tool that has helped make birth much safer in many situations. But knowing how birth hormones work helps the parent understand like why that environment matters. Like how can we play a role in addition to maybe needing Pitocin? How can we support an increase in, our natural hormone of oxytocin? It's also good in knowing like why that support matters and why labor sometimes feels different when interventions are involved. We say it all the time, that birth cannot be compared. Even if it's a situation where two people went into spontaneous labor, had an unmedicated birth, and birthed vaginally, there are still vast differences between those experiences. So even if it looks similar, it should never be compared. But I definitely think too, it's important to note that if you're somebody who, got induced because you medically needed to, or maybe you didn't medically need to, but you chose to, it just you can't compare that experience to spontaneous labor where that body had a very slow progression into active labor and also had that oxytocin loop that really helped them manage and cope with contractions versus a labor that was medically induced, maybe just at the beginning or throughout with Pitocin, missing that piece of the endorphins to help with the pain control.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%.
Yeah. So it's not about one over the other. It's not about comparing. It's not about judging. It's just truly about the education of understanding the difference and why that matters and what are some things that we can do if we're in that situation where an induction is needed, where we can, in addition, boost that natural oxytocin level.
Yes, I completely agree with you. Can we touch really quickly before we close? Because Pitocin is a medically derived method, but it's also used postpartum.
Yeah.
And so I think for some people out there, it seems counterintuitive that we can utilize Pitocin to get labor started and get things to go a little bit more, like get things going and be stronger contractions. But then Pitocin is given as a standard procedure or standard protocol in a hospital setting. To get the uterus to stop contracting.
To contract.
To contract.
But to stop the bleeding.
To stop the bleeding. I'm
exactly.
So sorry. You guys, come on. I'm coming off of a birth. Give me a second.
Yeah.
To stop the bleeding that is coming from the uterus. To get it to clamp down to stop the bleeding.
Exactly.
So can you just, for our listeners, just speak to that? Because I do think some people find it a little confusing.
Yeah. And it is confusing for sure. Especially because I think a lot of people have reasons and intentions to try and avoid Pitocin during labor, and those pros and cons or risks versus benefits changes when we're talking about Pitocin postpartum.
Quick pause. We're interrupting this episode for something important.
Almost everyone prepares for birth, but almost no one plans for after.
The Preparing for Postpartum course from How To Mom helps you get ready for real life healing, emotions, feeding, support, and what those first weeks actually look like.
No scare tactics, no sugarcoating, just honest prep you can access online on your own time and pull up when you actually need it.
And just a reminder to all of our How To Mom clients, don't forget to use your discount code at checkout.
Learn more at howtomom.com under courses. Now, back to today's episode. So that makes it confusing as well. What we didn't mention is you could also go into spontaneous labor, but have a very long labor for whatever reason.
Right.
And then we get to pushing, and that uterus it's a muscle. So it can get dehydrated, it can get tired, it can get overworked. And sometimes hospital settings will utilize Pitocin just to give that uterus a little extra strength to kind of help with that pushing stage. But when I started over 10 years ago, Pitocin, was used as a method to either prevent or slow a hemorrhage, but it was always only on an as needed basis. So it was always considered like, okay, how much blood has this mom lost? Is she considered to be hemorrhaging? Do we need to utilize Pitocin? And so it was never a standard. It was just more of a case-by-case situation.
Right.
Now, it is standard for everybody who gives birth in the hospital to have the recommendation of Pitocin postpartum, because they actually got new evidence years ago that showed that if Pitocin is used proactively, so right after you deliver your placenta, they either give you Pitocin through an IV if you have that IV, or they will do a shot in your thigh if you don't. Proactively, because the evidence shows that if a mom were to start hemorrhaging, they're able to catch up to that hemorrhage quicker and sooner than if they weren't proactive. And so again, you have every right to either opt in or decline, just like you do with anything. But now that's definitely a conversation that all of our clients and anybody birthing at a hospital, the question that they get when they are admitted, like, we give Pitocin after every delivery. That's something that you're interested in. So it's the same idea. It's the same reason. It's to help that uterus kind of contract down to its normal, maybe not pre-pregnancy size quite yet, but to substantially start to contract down to a much smaller size than when your baby was in there. And that can decrease your bleeding significantly. So obviously, we know nursing does that because that boosts oxytocin, but it's the same idea, but it's for different reasons.
Right. So I'm glad you said the nursing piece, because I wanted to just make sure that we touched on the fact of oxytocin. That's obviously like what we want the body to be doing and producing that to stop that bleeding once baby is in your arms. And so oxytocin also works the same way.
100%.
But again, like while we're looking at getting labor started or getting things kicked into gear, it also works on the complete opposite end as well.
And kind of full circle.
It is a full circle moment. I mean, wow, like not barely have any of those, do we? Like we have the birth world.
But I think too, to Nikki's point, is we need oxytocin during our labor. We also need oxytocin we can utilize the synthetic version Pitocin in labor if needed. We can also utilize Pitocin if needed. But truly, regardless, that job is to enhance what your body is already doing if it just needs a little bit more.
Yeah. And remember too, birth isn't just a mechanical process.
Correct.
You know, I mean, yes, we have modern medicine and advancements and new research and data. Thank goodness that things continue to grow and we continue to learn, but it's not mechanical in and itself. It's hormonal.
I think sometimes explaining these things can sound mechanical, but truly, I hope what you take from this episode is like really leaning into and understanding like it is 100% a hormonal journey and process.
Yes. And your oxytocin that you produce supports those contractions, supports pain relief, emotional bonding, and like we just said, and the transition into parenthood.
1,000%. Having your baby on your chest, having your baby massage your breast, like all of that is stimulating oxytocin, which is why that golden hour, 2 hours a day, weeks is so important. But we do know that while, medical tools like Pitocin can help when labor needs support, it is always recommended to create an environment that supports the body's natural hormones. And that in itself can make such a meaningful difference in your entire birth experience.
Yeah, you deserve that. Everyone deserves that feeling of control and just creating the desired outcome as much as you can with what you have on hand.
Agreed. Yeah. So hopefully you guys learned something, maybe more than one thing during today's episode, and we will be back with more topics.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you so much for listening. For show notes, links, and more information, please visit our website at howtomom.com. That's HOW2MOM.com.
And remember, whether you're a mom, a parent, or a caregiver, you are doing great. There's progress over perfection, and we're all just figuring it out together.